character as climate. And we're going to start off with a quote from Luigi Pirandello again from that novel One, No One and 100,000, in which we meet the protagonist Moscarda. And here's a quote from that. So he says, "You want to be, eh? There's this catch. In abstract, you cannot just be. The being must be trapped in a form, and for some time it has to stay in it, here or there, this way or that. And everything, as long as it lasts, bears the penalty of its form, the penalty of being this way and of no longer being able to be otherwise." In his continued anguish to solve the mystery of the self, Pirandello's protagonist, Moscarda, first highlights the fact that in order to be, one must assume a form in which to be. One can never not be a character. He then goes on to point out the cost and gain inherent in adopting any given character. Character is an opportunity that always comes at an opportunity cost, other characters, and therefore other positions, perspectives, and insights are foregone in favour of the character adopted. Just as, according to Hong and their team, only one cultural frame can guide cognition at any given time, so too can only one character, or behavioural frame, be inhabited at a time. The precise character one ends up adopting when performing theatrically, when writing a PhD thesis, or when buying groceries becomes then a matter of consequence, the politics of which will be discussed in the next chapter. Here I will briefly consider an alternative, although related, model to the frame that adds further nuance to the intuition we are building about character. Climate. The relationship between climate and weather is analogous to the relationship between character and behaviour. So a character is a bit like a climate in this analogy, and behaviour is a little bit like weather in this analogy. So let's take a deeper look at that. Just as weather is the actual state in which we find a climate system at any given time, whether rain, fog, or sunshine, behaviour too is the observable state in which we find a human being at any given time. Climate, meanwhile, is a more abstract notion. It cannot be observed as a singular outcome like weather can. Climate is a system of probabilities for weather outcomes. Likewise, character is a system of probabilities for behavioural outcomes. This means that the tools used to model climate and make predictions about the weather might potentially be used to model character and make predictions about behaviour. Climate can be modelled, as can other complex systems, using a phase portrait. A phase portrait is a plotted graph showing all the states in which a system finds itself within a wider space of all possible states. In the case of climate, we can start by imagining a multi-dimensional space containing all possible kinds of weather. There are many dimensions in this space because weather can be described using many parameters. So there could be one dimension that is just describing temperature, one that is just describing humidity, air current, etc. So weather can be described using many different dimensions. It's a multi-dimensional space that we need to construct to describe a particular weather state that we are seeing outside. So let's imagine a multi-dimensional space like this that contains all the possible kinds of weather, and any given point in this space describes a particular state or a type of weather, since the location of the point tells us the value of each dimension, like the degree of temperature or humidity in that particular state. So we're imagining a mathematical space in which we could describe any possible type of weather. Now that we have this space in front of us, we can go outside and take measurements to plot the current state of the weather. Once we have taken all our measurements, we will be able to plot a single point into our space of possible weathers that describes the state of the weather right now. What is it? It's kind of cloudy and drizzly right now where I am. So let us imagine that we repeat this process every day for a year. So tomorrow I go out and again I measure the temperature, humidity, etc. I describe the weather as accurately as I can again. And each day the weather might be slightly different. And over time it may vary greatly, but there will always be a point in the space of possible weathers to describe each day. After a year, a scatter plot of points will have appeared in our multidimensional space, causing a fuzzy shape to form within it. This shape is climate. It shows us the character of the weather system. While different states within a climate can vary dramatically, from freezing snows to sweltering sunshine, the overall pattern of states is consistent, characteristic. In a dynamical system, such as that governing weather, a climate is what is known as an attractor. It is as if that cloudy shape in the phase portrait, which emerged out of plotting the state of weather over time, revealed an outline of an underlying invisible force which attracts weather into falling into familiar patterns. The phase portrait can also be used as a tool to hypothetically model character. Just as we imagine the space of all possible states of weather, we can imagine the space of all possible behaviours. This would, of course, be an incredibly complex space, comprised of countless dimensions, describing all possible aspects of behaviour. Each point within this space would describe a particular behaviour, such as crying at the end of a sad film, or tapping someone on the shoulder to return the money that has fallen out of their pocket. Not only this, but a point in such a space would describe exactly how someone is crying, or the manner of their shoulder tapping. Now that we have the space of all possible behaviours, we can undertake the same process of measurement that we applied to daily weather and plot at regular intervals the behaviour of a given person. As we saw in the case of weather, the gradual plotting of behavioural states would begin to slowly reveal a cloudy shape within the space of all possible behaviours. This shape is character. Within its cloudy scatter of points, we may observe great diversity in the kinds of behaviours exhibited, whether extreme or mundane. But the overall shape is what is familiar, is what we recognise as the person we know. Character, like climate, is an attractor, since we can see behavioural states tending to fall within the contours of its shape. We are not shocked when, after a summer of hot weather, the seasons change and bring on the autumnal rains and the frosts of winter, because however vastly these weather states may vary, they belong to the same climate, and this variation is expected. But we will be shocked when the climate changes. A change in climate does not merely represent a change in weather, but an entirely new landscape of weather probabilities, a new normal to which we are not adapted. The weather states of a changed climate are fundamentally unpredictable by our meteorologists, by our infrastructures, and by our bodies, which have evolved to predict the patterns of the old climate. The reason we are afraid of climate change is the same reason we are afraid of character change. Character change in a loved one, such as can be brought about in various ways by damage to the brain, is disturbing because it represents a new normal in terms of that loved one's behaviour. One cannot predict their behavior based on one's history with them, and may as well be dealing with an utter stranger, an altogether different person. If a character change entails redrawing an entirely new shape within the space of all possible behaviors, this begs the question of whether I am really changing character within my performances. When performing, am I exploring an entirely new attractor in the phase portrait, or am I merely distorting one of the corners of the existing shape? I've described that the initial stages of my performance process involve changing one simple dimension of my behavior, such as the volume of my voice or the energy behind my gesticulations. I've also described how these small changes develop into larger shifts in my overall perspective on things. Changing the dimension of behavior can be visualized as dragging one of the points plotted in my phase portrait along one axis. What are the consequences of that? Does sliding one point along a given dimension bring with it a cascade of other adjustments in the shape of the attractor that is the character I'm adopting? A performance experiment I conducted in which I tracked how inhabiting different characters affected my thought patterns and the kinds of stories and ideas I could come up with when in character is documented in Thought Shift Performance Experiment, linked below. I found that with each new character I adopted, I was able to arrive at a set of ideas that have never occurred to me before. This suggested that character change, switch, or adjustment, depending on the degree of change I'm actually applying to my habitual character in the space of performance, effectively shifted the way I thought and opened me up to new ideas, as if they had been thought of by someone else. When I shift character, I tilt the landscape of my mind. I can then begin to expose this altered character to the world and see how it reacts. By plotting its reactions, I'm building a picture of the new character. I'm getting to know them. By starting with thinking about character as a frame of mind to a climate or attractor plotted by instances of behavior, we arrive at one of the research findings of this thesis. Character is an attractor within behavioural space, which is to say, it is the very shape of what is thinkable to the human being for the time it is adopted.